Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. My name is Annette. I'm with OSSE and I will be running some things behind the scenes today. We will get started in just a couple of minutes. We have 500 people registered to tune in to the webinar today, so we will be allowing a couple extra minutes for people to connect and make sure everything's set. You should be able to see my screen right now. It says serving students joined into OSSE's webinar about serving students with disabilities. We will begin at approximately 1:05 p.m. In the meantime, we're giving people an opportunity to tune in and connect. While you're waiting, if a few of you could please take a moment to type into the question box. You should have a question chat box in your tool dashboard. If you could type in the box there if you can hear me loud and clear, and that will give me an idea of whether or not the sound is working. Great. All right. That's enough responses. Thank you so much. Oh, wow. 100 of you can hear me. That's great. Okay. We will start at 1:05 with the OSSE presenters, just giving a couple minutes for everyone to log in. If you've just joined us, you're probably in the right place, serving students with disabilities. Also, I will be sending an email with the handouts for today's webinar to the email address that you used to register for this meeting. So if you're joined right now and you can hear my voice, that means the email address you used to register actually worked, and you should be receiving an email from me in just a couple minutes that has a copy of the slides for today, a copy of the toolkit that is the basis of our webinar today, and a PDF copy of the Google Forms and templates that we will be sharing with you today as optional but amazing resources. So stay tuned, watching your inbox for an email from annette.thacker@dc.gov, where the 3 handouts will be attached. I'll get that out in just a couple minutes. Again, if you've just joined, we will be starting the webinar in approximately 2 minutes. We're allowing people time to connect and check their audio settings. I am currently about to, as soon as the webinar starts, you should be receiving an email in your inbox, which contains a copy of the PowerPoint slides for today, a copy of the toolkit, and a PDF copy of several of the Google Forms and templates that we will be showcasing today as optional resources. Again, those will be emailed to all registrants a few minutes after we get started today so that you can reference them throughout the webinar. And again, if you're just joining us, in your dashboard for GoToWebinar, there should be a question box. You can pop that box out, stretch it out, spread it, put it on your screen different places. This question box is how you will submit your questions today. We will not be able to answer every single question that comes in due to the large size of the audience. However, we encourage you to type your questions in anyway, because we will definitely be reviewing all questions following the webinar to develop an FAQ document. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. At this time, I will turn the time over to our presenters, and I will start recording so that folks can access this recording afterwards.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Carpenter. I'm a professional development specialist for OSSE. I see a lot of familiar names, and I'm really excited to share some tools and resources with you today. I am joined today by Kelly Scholl. She's a data analysis manager for OSSE, and she's the driving force between the really dizzying array of data tools we're going to share today. We're also joined by Melody Maitland. She's the Director of Student Support Services for DC International Public Charter School. Melody's been a great partner as we've worked to respond to the new demands that we're all facing right now, and we're so happy to have her here today. The three of us are supported, of course, by Annette, who is our GoToWebinar ninja. I think that we're supposed to call her a logistics facilitator. We're also joined by and supported by Victoria Glick, Deputy Assistant Superintendent for the Division of Systems and Supports for K-12, Angela Alanake, a student support super genius who is going to be helping to respond to some of the questions, and Tiffany Ingram, an IDA compliance monitor and a technical assistance provider that I've worked with many times, and she's fantastic. She's going to be helping to respond to questions as well. I think we're ready for the next slide, Annette. Thank you. So as you can see, this is going to be followed by some more training. So I don't want anybody to get worried when they see a tremendous amount of information and resources in this 2-hour introduction. It's just an introduction today. 2 hours is not enough time to really get to know the amazing customizable integratable tools that Kelly has made, or to fully explore how they work together to enhance your programming, your engagement of students and families, and your data collection and analysis practices, both in this current remote learning context or in a blended learning context, as well as when we're back in brick and mortar school. They're useful in all of those contexts. We're going to offer 2 rounds of 3 remote follow-up technical assistance sessions this summer. There'll be 90-minute sessions that'll have a more in-depth exploration of the tools that we're going to discuss today, and they're going to be more interactive, more like what you are used to from the trainings that you may have attended with me before. For that reason, because they're going to be more in-depth and interactive, to make that possible, we're going to share the link to register at the end today. And we're going to ask that participating LEAs register no more than 2 attendees. These should be folks that can train and support building staff to use the tools in whatever configuration or using whatever protocols your LEA chooses to adopt LEA or building wide. So the content in each round will be the same. So we're going to offer it, mid-June to early July, and we'll do the whole thing over again the end of July through mid-August. But you don't need to do both. You just need to do one. We recommend, though, that both participants for your LEA attend together whenever possible, because you can do your best collaboration that way and make the best use of the tools. To that end, some housekeeping. There are a lot of people, 362 right now in this webinar. So this is definitely going to feel different from the trainings that I typically provide. We still encourage you to ask questions about the tools and content as they come up. You can use the question box for that. We are going to be pausing throughout the webinar to respond to pressing or frequently asked questions. If for some reason we don't respond to you here, know that all of your questions that you put into this box are retained so that we can then create a follow-up FAQ email for you that will also include these resources and links to everything that you see here today. All right, and now I think we're ready to move. Thank you. So at this point, you should have received an email with some resources from Annette. Can I ask one person? Let's see, I'm going to pick somebody whose name I can see right now.
All right, the handout's on its way. It hasn't come quite yet. It's on its way. It hasn't come yet? Okay, thank you. So you're going to get some handouts any second. When you do, you're going to get an LEA toolkit. You're going to get a PDF of these slides, and you're going to get a PDF document that is just a PDF version of all of the electronic tools that we have created. That way, you'll be able to look at the PDF instead of trying to click in and out of a bunch of different Google Sheets or Google Forms. You'll be able to take a look at it without it being overwhelming on your screen and without distracting you from people's good questions or
or content. And so all of those things will be coming to you momentarily. Our goal today is pretty simple. We're going to discuss how LEAs can use the resources in the toolkit to make sure that as you generate policies and procedures to serve students with disabilities in this changing context for learning, you're maintaining your consistency with IDEA, okay, and its requirements, and with the key principles of special education service provision. So we're going to discuss those key principles today, but I want us all to keep in mind that these key principles are not just best practices, they're the non-negotiable requirements that should drive your work. Beyond helping you remain compliant, these tools are useful far beyond special education service provision and documentation. As you are looking at the tools and when Kelly shares them, if you see additional uses or you want to deploy them to enhance your service to other special populations or for every student, you can do that. So please consider broader applications of these tools as you think they are appropriate for your LEA. All righty, ready to move it on. Thank you. So the first thing we're going to do, as I mentioned, is talk about the key principles of special ed provision. These tools are aligned to these principles, so we're going to ground ourselves in them now. Please notice that this slide doesn't say key principles of special education service provision during remote learning or in a post-COVID world. These principles were foundational before, and they are especially important now when we are limited by a lack of face-to-face interactions with our colleagues, with our students, with families, and that complicates service provision, assessment, communication, and documentation of student progress and engagement. Thanks, Annette. We can move on. All right, so the key principles that are shared here or founded in guidance provided by the U.S. Department of Education and OSSE. Throughout the toolkit, you will find the links to the foundational guidance. It is important, and we strongly encourage you and your LEA's leadership to review the foundational documents that are linked in the toolkit, because they are the guidance that should be helping you make decisions and establish transparent discussions with families as you navigate remote or blended learning contexts and as you plan for reentry. So familiarize yourself with those documents and keep this toolkit handy because it has some pretty easy ways to reference foundational guidance just embedded right inside. All right, and that we're ready. So the key principles are LEA discretion and flexibility. Okay, so embedded in those ideas, we're going to do a deep dive, are the idea that IDEA equals flexibility. There's always flexibility included in IDEA, but now we may have a little more flexibility. We'll discuss that in a minute. You always have been expected to partner with parents. Yes.
Is my screen being crazy? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So it should be the three key principles at this point.
This one.
Yep. Okay, we're good? So the second key principle is transparent communication with students and families. To identify solutions for barriers to service delivery, you need to work with families to identify those barriers and then to try to find ways to overcome those barriers, and then document those team decisions and provide that documentation to families. And finally, you should always be using data to address students' needs for support. And you can't be student specific. You can't put the I in IEP without data. You also need that data, and we'll need it especially during the recovery planning process, which is a little ways down the road, to consider receipt of educational benefit. and determine what services students will need. All right, Annette, we're ready to move on. Are you able to move on to the balancing LEA discretion and flexibility slide, Annette?
Yes, I'm on the transition slide. Is it slow to broadcast to everyone? We may have frozen.
Uh-oh. Okay. It's frozen. Okay, guys. So while we wait for it to unfreeze, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, look at that. Yay.
Magic. All right.
Magic. Okay. I think we broke GoToWebinar with all of your attention.
Breaks GoToWebinar with 380, but we will press on.
Okay. So balancing LEA discretion and flexibility. So IDEA allows for flexibility, the flexibility you need to generate solutions to new contexts. That flexibility is always there because students' circumstances have always been ever changing. But back in March, DOE recognized that the determination of how FAPE is to be provided may actually need to be different during this national emergency. While you have the discretion to be flexible, there are some requirements that have not changed. You still need to ensure that your policies and procedures are consistent with IDEA requirements, and you need to continue to partner with parents. All right, next slide. Everybody cross your fingers. Yay, there we go. Okay, so you've got the discretion to be flexible, but you also have the responsibility to ensure consistency with IDEA. That means that the systems that you put in place should not only be designed based on student level data and family input, they should also be designed to collect student level data and family input and document service provision and team decisions. So you're not only using data to create what you provide, you're creating what you provide to give you more data. Next slide, please, Annette. So, thank you. As always, you have to partner with parents. Okay? Now, more than ever, this is incredibly true. Parents are actually our co-teachers now. Well, they're your co-teachers now. They've always been our partners. But when it comes to direct instruction and service provision, we rely on them now more than ever. We also rely on them to make their children available for assessment, for instruction, and just available so that we know that everybody's doing okay, right? If we don't hear from a family when we're teaching remotely, that's concerning because the student's not showing up every day for us to know they're all right. And so we need to make sure those relationships are strong for students' academic well-being, their social emotional well-being, but also just for safety and health. Okay, we're ready, Annette. And as many of you have heard me say probably a trillion times, making decisions on an individual student basis requires a strong system for collecting student level data, especially since the kind of incidental, informal opportunities you've had in the past to gather information about student access and student progress, they're not as numerous, or they may not be there at all right now. And so we hope the tools that we're going to discuss next are going to support you to maintain consistency with IDEA requirements and evidence-based practices as we adapt to these circumstances and maintain our support of students. Next slide, please, Annette. All right, so when we're talking about balancing flexibility and discretion, there's one challenge we're going to talk about first, and that is working with families remotely to develop flexible, creative, individualized approaches to service provision. As you work to balance these things, you'll need to find new ways to collaborate with families and to provide students with individualized supports. We're ready. Thank you. So for each challenge, we've got some solutions for you and some tools that you can use. First, we're going to talk about the challenge of working with families, as I said. We've got 3 sample solutions to the challenge of working with families to develop creative and flexible approaches. These solutions take the form of actionable tools that you can use as is. You can tweak them to meet the needs of your LEA, or you can use them as a starting point for developing or enhancing your own resources. Kelly's going to talk to you more about that in a moment. But please note, you have been provided with links to the tools. When you click the link, you'll be invited to make a copy of each tool. Once you've made a copy of a tool, it's yours to use or adapt as however your LEA sees fit. And Kelly's going to talk about that process with you. The tools we demonstrate today are linked together, and your copies can be too. After the webinar, based on the questions you asked today, Kelly is going to, while we're answering all these FAQs, Kelly's going to be putting together a how-to document and a little video to help you make the best use of these tools and to optimize them for however your LEA envisions them being used. Speaking of Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to her now so she can ground our exploration of the tools in the first one that we're going to discuss, the sample student data tool and user guide. All right, Annette, it's Kelly's turn to drive.
Can you see and hear me all right?
Looks good, Kelly.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, before I say what I'm supposed to say, I just want to thank all of the educators who are managing this IT on top of the relationship management and actual education. I have 3 good-sized screens in front of me, and I've never felt so overwhelmed and like I need a new screen. So thank you for all of you who are managing this day in and day out. Annette will be sending out PDFs of these tools and the links to the tools themselves, but I'd like to encourage you not to open up the links just yet. I think it will be easier if I walk through it on my screen and you use the PDF versions before you dive into the tools themselves. And like Jen said, I'll follow up with more of the how after this, so no reason to get worried about that just yet. What OSSE has tried to do here is draft a template that you and your LEA can use to help bring communication, engagement, and progress and service delivery data into one tool. Before I show you the tool, I want to make 3 important points. The first point is that it is your responsibility to work with your LEA to make sure that you follow all data privacy protocols, as this suite of tools is designed to collect and store sensitive student information. So make sure wherever you use and store this tool is FERPA compliant. We'll be sharing the tool in Google Drive, but that's just because it's the easiest way to share the tool. If your LEA has determined that your Google access is FERPA compliant, then you can continue to use it in Google. But if your LEA does not use Google Drive to share or store the information, then you can download the templates and store them in another secure cloud-based application. Which brings me to my second point, that this tool is really just a sample of what you and your LEA can be doing to use data to make decisions in this challenging time. You're welcome to customize and use this tool in whichever way makes sense for your LEA. You can use all of it or some pieces or none of it at all. But we do hope there are at least a few pieces here that will be useful to you and your team. Like Jen said, the tool is yours, and once you copy it onto your Google Drive or wherever else it is safe for your LEA to use, OSSE can't see the data and we won't be collecting data via this tool. Which is the third point, before we get to the fun part, that this tool is not a replacement for SEDS. SEDS continues to be the system of record, and everything that you are required to report in SEDS you are still required to report in SEDS, even if you use this tool to a T. As you will see, this tool does have redundancies with SEDS, and it's up to you and your team to decide which processes work best for you. If your team is able to easily navigate SEDS, you may not need all of the pieces in this toolkit. If you would rather have everything in one place, it may be worth inputting some of the data elements that you also input into SEDS. Another important note in this regard is that other LEAs will not be able to see what you have recorded in this tool, so you should still be uploading information to SEDS that would help the receiving school in the case that a student transfers LEAs. Okay, that was the boring parts, but I had to say all those parts, and now we're going to get to the fun stuff. Okay, this tool is designed to combine multiple perspectives and data points into one view. So the tool really relies on these input forms. We'll be talking about these forms a little bit later this afternoon, so I won't go into too much detail here, but the highlight is that these forms are designed to collect information on communications with students and parents, as well as log educator feedback and information on service attempts. The data will then feed into both a student dashboard and a summary dashboard, which displays all information on all students in the workbook. Like I said, we'll be getting back into the input forms a little later on, so let's jump into the sample student dashboard. I'll walk you through the dashboard now by sharing my screen, and we'll follow up after this meeting with the link for you to copy these tools for yourself and more detailed instructions on how to use them. We're definitely not going to get a chance to get to all of the how-to questions on Google, so I'm going to share the what right now and promise we'll follow up more on the how. If you do have a how question you want to make sure we get to, go ahead and enter it in the chat, and we might not be able to answer it right now, but we'll include it in our follow-up. Okay. Can you all now see the Google tool?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so this here is the student dashboard. The idea of this dashboard is that if your LEA decides to use it this way and it's helpful, each student would have a dashboard. So at the top of the page is some standard student information. The gray fields are the ones you'll have to fill out, and the rest of the data can be populated by other data sources in the tool. The next section is a list of all of the needs that have been identified by the family, by the student, or by the educator, and have been recorded in the input forms. For example, if a student said that they wanted help with time management, and a parent said they wanted help with food security, these two needs would populate here as a reminder whenever you look at the student sheet. This is the sort of thing that you would likely just sort of know if you were seeing a student every day. But should we resume school in a remote context, or should we return to school, but so many students' needs and situations have changed, we thought it would be helpful to have documentation of those right up front. As a note, as my team and I were entering this information, even the sample information, almost all of us put a need for emotional well-being. So I think that says a lot about the time we're in, even when we're making up responses. The next section is engagement information that reports engagement in instruction as reported by educators and engagement in service delivery as reported by providers. So this is information that ideally educators would report on a weekly basis on how engaged their students are in different types of instruction, as well as the attempts they're making at remote learning and their completion of remote learning assignments. This next section is the service delivery. So it counts the number of minutes attempted and the number of minutes attended for service delivery attempts. And this final section is self-reported information from students about what what sort of learning they have engaged in and what sort of learning they found most useful. This information is important not only because we want students engaged in learning, but also if we should resume in a distance learning environment, it would be an important indicator of student well-being and safety. If a student never or rarely engages, we're probably going to want to get a better idea of what's going on with that student and what kind of support they need. So that's the idea here, is to be able to track and quantify student engagement in a way that's helpful later on. The next sections are the assessment results and the IEP goals, which rely on data that you input in order to monitor progress towards goals. So again, this is likely something that your LEA is already doing in some form or another, but it's here so that if you want everything in one place, you can input the information here. For both IEP goals, assessments, and if you are to populate IEP goals here, they would auto-populate in these graphs. At the bottom of the sheet are all of the communications recorded from the forms: family input, student input, educator input, and the service tracker. On both the student input and the family input communication logs, if you scroll all the way to the right, there's a space to record action steps following the communication. At the beginning of a typical school year, there are a whole lot of student and family needs, and we can only imagine that will be multiplied this year. I know I write down everything because my brain is mashed potatoes by the end of the day, and my job isn't a fraction as stressful as that of a special educator. How I would use this is after a phone call and recording the information in the input form, I would go in and write how I'm going to address the needs identified in the conversation. So if a family reported needing assistance with housing, that's something I really want to make sure I didn't forget. So I might make a note to introduce them to the social worker or follow up with the community schools coordinator, and then a note on how the introduction went. I'd add the date completed when I felt the appropriate connection had been made. So next time I talk to the family, I could follow up and ask, has the social worker been in touch with you about your housing? Again, these tools are just samples and can be totally customized by you and your team, so that if that process doesn't work for you, that is quite all right. You can leave this part and take the other parts. Okay. I know that was a lot of information, and there are a lot of great questions in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and move to the summary dashboard, which combines information on all students in the workbook into a quick view. And I promise that we will be getting to those questions. If not in this session, then afterwards. Okay, this is the summary dashboard. The idea of this dashboard is to provide highlights and summaries from all of the data collected for all of the students using these input forms and dashboard on your team. You and your team should decide if and how you want to use these tools. Depending on your context and existing systems, it might make sense for your whole LEA to use one set of tools, so all of the same input forms are being used and all of the data from those input forms populate one workbook, or school or cluster or classroom might be the right grouping. You can make as many copies of the tools as you want, so each school could have their own workbook and their own set of forms that populate the workbook. So students in school A aren't appearing in school B's workbook. Again, I'll explain more in the follow-up on how to, but the key here is that you should talk with your team about who should be in the summary form and how, and if your team will use these tools together. The first section here is a list of students who have identified immediate needs: physical health and safety, housing, hunger, and or food security or emotional well-being. I love data, I dream about data, I think spreadsheets are so fun, but when we are taking in data, especially at a time as busy as the beginning of the year, in the middle of a pandemic, we want to be really careful that something as important as a student or family asking for help with their physical safety isn't relegated to row 27, column X. So here it is, right at the top, the students who have reported immediate needs in the past 30 days. The next section is a summary of contacts with families, students, educators, and providers. There is a count of those contacts, both a total count and a count in the last 30 days. The idea here is to provide a summary of the use of the input forms because the rest of the tool relies so heavily on them. It will be important to monitor those contacts are being made and input forms are being submitted in order to get the most out of this tool. There's also a chart of the reasons for family communications, again in total or in the last 30 days. Just to see why folks are reaching out to families, what those communications are about. Finally, there's a list of families who have not been contacted in the past 30 days. Like Jen will be talking about and has been talking about, families are partners in this work now more than ever, and regular communication is key. So this tool is designed to let you know at a glance which families have not been contacted in the past month. Of course, if these input forms are not being used and there are other conversations happening with families, those will not be recorded here. So again, you'll only get out of this tool what you put into it, so it's worth having those conversations with your team about how and if you'll use this tool. The next section is engagement data, which is similar to the student dashboard, except that it also calls out at the bottom here, students who have 0 minutes of engagement in service or instruction. Like I mentioned before, this will be a window into students' well-being. If remote learning continues, it will be important to identify quickly which students are not being engaged, as they may need a check-in or some other sort of support. Finally, everybody's favorite indicators. I work at OSSE, so I of course have to talk about our timeliness indicators. This is one of those functions that is repetitive of SED, and SED continues to be the system of record for this. But we thought that for some teams, there may be valuable in calling out overdue and upcoming IEPs and eligibilities here as well. So here it is. This is where it will appear, the overdue and upcoming IEPs and eligibilities will appear. So that was a lot of information. We'll take a few deep breaths. Please continue to submit your questions via the chat. I do want to add that yes, the idea here is that for whatever grouping of students that you and your team decide on, whether it be school or classroom, all of the students would have their one sheet assigned to them for all of their individual information that could sort of be an at-a-glance tool for that specific student and be useful when talking with parents or discussing the student's needs. And then there would be one summary dashboard, which would really have the highlights from all of the students in the workbook. So if this were for 12 students, there would be 12 student sheets and then one summary sheet. Remember, this is a sample tool. You're welcome to copy it over and use it exactly as it is, or customize it and not use it at all. The purpose and idea here is to provide you an example of how we can set up a system to reinforce what we all know to be so important in special education in this extraordinary time: addressing immediate needs, engaging families, students, and educators, tracking engagement, and using data to drive decision-making. If your team completes these forms thoughtfully and with fidelity, you can imagine there's going to be a whole lot of information in here to support decision-making, aid and cooperation amongst educators and members of the IEP team, and to help families and students get what they need at this time. It's as close to a one-stop shop as I could come up with, given the existing limitations of our special ed data systems. And if you and your team opt not to use this tool, I still encourage you to think about how you'll be tracking these pieces of data, how you'll be getting the most urgent matters to rise to the top, and how you will monitor communications with students and families. Okay, without further ado, I will hand it back to Jen, who will be talking you through additional tools that are ready for your LEA to adapt and use in order to address these challenges.
Thank you. Kelly and Annette, I think we should take a moment to address some of the questions that are specifically about the data tool before we move forward. Would that be okay with you, Annette?
Sounds great. Kelly, do you want to switch back to your screen real quick so we can address some of these questions?
Yeah.
So one question that came up, and I wanted to highlight here before we get to sort of a greater Q&A session, was around DCPS's decision not to use Google. And here's a question that came in. Is there a way for this tool to be in Microsoft OneDrives rather than Google? DCPS is fully supporting Microsoft Office products and the security is better. I see a great answer in the chat, but I'll let Kelly take it over if she wants. But in the Q&A, it says it's a great suggestion, a great question, and OSSE can find a way to share tools via OneDrive with DCPS since we all belong to the DC government network. Is there anything you'd like to add, Kelly?
Nope, that sounds right. This should be able to work on any sort of cloud-based sharing platform, so we can work on converting this to OneDrive as well so that folks can use the tool there.
Thank you. So we'll follow up after the webinar to discuss it. In the meantime, you can view the tools in the PDF copy that was sent by email. As for sharing the student data by using these tools, you need to defer to your DCPS policies for securing or for securely sharing student data or whatever LEA that you are in. What OSSE shares with you is simply a template and a sample, and it's not going to contain any actual student data. Just to reiterate something that Kelly mentioned earlier, when I created links for you in the document, I made sure that it was only to copy so that you would click it and know that not only are you getting your own copy, but that we are not going to be retained on your copy. So you're maintaining your data privacy even from us right up front. Okay, there was one more I wanted to get to. Is OSSE going to be following up with information on what we should do if all outreach attempts are not working to engage students, et cetera, et cetera? So OSSE is going to be following up with deeper conversations about all of these things, and you'll have an attempt to register for those technical assistance sessions at the end today. Yeah, so let's we'll move on and we can come back to questions again at our originally planned for time, but I wanted to make sure that everybody was very clear that you do not have to use these tools. If you like parts of them, you can use them to inform your own toolkit. But this is not a must. This is just, hey, here are some examples of some things that you can do. Having said that, if you are an LEA that uses Google and is determined that it is FERPA compliant and you are able to maintain student data privacy, there will be directions for how to relink these tools back together again. Because obviously when you open your own copy, they're no longer merged together like ours are into this greater tool. So you'll get directions on how to do that and the follow-up how to. So stay tuned for that.
And I'll just add to that because there were some questions about how all of this connects to one another and who could see what. That is up to you in your LEA. We'll give you instructions for connecting the forms to this workbook so that the information input in the forms directly feeds into this workbook, which then populates the student dashboards and the summary dashboard. Your LEA can choose to share just the forms with folks to input data and have a smaller universe of people actually being able to see the dashboard. But we'll follow up on more of those how-to. But yes, the in summary, the idea is that those input forms are used and auto-populate this tool for the most part. There are things like IEP due date will ask you to put in there, but that's the general idea.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, I think we're ready to go back to Annette and to the next slide.
All right, can you see my screen now, Jen?
I can. Could you advance to slide 14, please, Annette? All right, thank you very much. So I'm going to direct everybody to the PDF of all of the sample forms and worksheets. We're on page 21 in that PDF of all the sample forms, just so you know where we are. The next 3 resources are going to be a little more, let's say, analog or a little less exciting, but they're important to consider all the same. The first one we're going to talk about is a sample service adaptation worksheet. This is very important. So once you have data that you can use to consider student service provision in the remote and blended learning context, you're going to be better prepared to communicate barriers to service provision to students' families. You can use the worksheet that you'll see on page 21 of that PDF document, the sample service adaptation worksheet, to guide and document IEP team decision-making around service delivery in remote or blended learning contexts. This worksheet also provides you with a space to document service refusal. Later, we're going to preview an input form and a service tracker that providers or teachers can use. Each of those tools provides you with an opportunity to link documentation like this to the worksheet directly, and put it all in the sample student data tool. So that is to say that if you were using this in a suite of Google tools, or I believe in OneDrive, maybe configured a little differently, you can fill this form out electronically, and you can save it, and then you can link it into one of your student service trackers or your teacher input trackers, so that it would be right there with all of your other data in one place. You also could choose in whatever electronic platform or whatever platform you were going to use to create your own suite of data collection and analysis tools to make this into something that's more easily used along with this Google suite or whatever electronic suite that you have. Also, you could just print it out and do it. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, so the next tool starts on page 22. It's a sample accommodation adaptation matrix. Like everything else, this is not the be all end all. This is the only way to do it. It's just a sample of something that you could put together, a starting place for you, so that you could discuss how student accommodations might be adapted in the remote context. It's organized by accommodation type, much like when you consider testing accommodations, setting, timing and scheduling, presentation and response. So there are several pages there. It's organized so that you can see what the student would receive in the typical classroom environment, and then see a list of suggestions for how that might work at home. And you could, if you like to use this tool or you want to make your own, you can learn more from your students, your families, your teachers' innovations as we move through this time and we get better at this. And you can add more suggestions or links to resources to your own version of the matrix. And you could also customize it to the ideas that are working best for your students and their service providers. We're ready to move to the next one. The third solution that we have provided is just another resource toolkit. We tried to keep it, there are a lot of resource toolkits for digital learning out there right now, and so we've tried to keep this as streamlined as we can. This is a promising practice resource matrix. It starts on page 27 in the PDF. It again starts, it's a starting point for you to make your own LEA-specific library of resources to help you and your staff. There may be resources for developing and delivering engaging, accessible remote learning materials that you are using as an LEA. You don't have to keep our links in here. You can, but you can say, no, 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 we're using platform X and we want everybody to do that. Or we're using Dojo in this way remotely and we want everyone to do that. So you can create a customized resource kit for your folks. The first section is all about making sure that your tier 1, your instruction, your learning materials are engaging and accessible for as many learners as possible. The second section is about individualizing supports for students with disabilities. And the third section is resources that will help you support families to be instructional partners. Again, it's not a be-all end-all. You can add, you can subtract, you can reorganize. We recommend that you align your version to the resources that are the best fit for your LEA and avoid creating a list that's too lengthy or too overwhelming. We also recommend sharing these resources with families to support your collaboration and your instructional partnership. Having said that, there is another tool that's going to be sent to you in the near future, and it's going to be focused on assessing student present levels remotely. And so rather than create yet another tool for folks to use, what I will do is I will merge links to different remote assessment resources into this toolkit and then send you guys all an update to say, hey, we added assessment to our promising practice resource matrix. So that is coming down the pike, and then when we do have these separate deep dive sessions, we'll be moving closer to those assessment conversations. All right, Annette, are we ready to get to the questions?
We're seeing a lot of great questions coming into the chat box. We love the engagement in today's webinar. Thank you for being thoughtful about these tools we are presenting. Just a reminder that all of these tools and forms are completely optional. OSSE is not mandating that you use these forms in any way. Rather, these are optional resources that you may find helpful as you work with your school teams to serve students in unusual circumstances, such as not seeing them face-to-face for long periods of time. Some of you have questions about whether or not these tools could be accessible by families. We know that every family situation is different. Not every family has access to a computer or device. We encourage you to be innovative in how you communicate with parents. And some of our deep dive sessions, technical assistance sessions this summer, will specifically talk about strategies and ideas that you could use to increase parent engagement or be innovative or creative in the face of those types of challenges. Also, we will note that Google Forms work well on smartphones, so parents and families don't necessarily need a device other than a smartphone to be able to give input into some of these forms. So we appreciate all of your thoughtful questions. Keep them coming, as your questions will help to drive the specific things we address in our deeper dive technical assistance sessions that will happen over the summer.
So thank you so much, Annette. I'd like to add on a couple of responses. We have a question from a brand new special education coordinator wondering about a special education training hub or training library. So that's my job, is to provide professional development around special education, and I've done that in the past in these like all day, really fun series, fun for me anyway, I don't know about you guys, series events that were, 24 hours of training over the course of a year. Obviously, we're not going to do that. So what I'm looking at right now is moving those courses or compressing those into webinars, or considering some online courses through perhaps a platform like Schoology. And so just so you know, the sort of IEP quality basics, high leverage practice series, we're looking at ways to deliver that in a socially distant manner. So those things will become available to you in the future.
We also want to add a comment onto that. I want to acknowledge that today there are many different types of attendees. For example, there are several of you participating today that serve as the main special education point of contact for your entire LEA or local education agency, meaning your charter school network or your public school district. If you are serving as the main LEA special ed point of contact, you will have opportunities to receive additional training on your specific roles and responsibilities later this summer. If you are not in that role, for example, if you are a school-based special education point of contact for a DCPS school campus, please know that at the DCPS central office is a team of staff who serve as the official LEA level special education point of contact and who are in communication and receive resources from OSSE at that LEA level. If you are at the school level and you're wondering about additional training opportunities to carry out your role as a school level special education point of contact, please, please, please make sure you reach out to your central office team to ask about additional training opportunities, guidelines, resources, and policies. There are many things that OSSE defers to the LEA level, so to your central office level for protocol and decisions and tools used. So if you are at the school level, please do not forget to, please definitely reach out to your central office to learn about how your LEA plans to do things and how you could perhaps use some of the tools showcased here today to supplement, complement, or help you fulfill those roles that are specified by your central office. And I will second Jennifer Carpenter's plug for trainings. Jennifer provides a number of evidence-based practice trainings that are applicable to all people in special education, administrator or educator roles, regardless of your role. So you have two avenues of support as a school level special education point of contact. You have your central office to support you and help you know what your LEA policy and procedures and tools will be. And then you have Jen at OSSE who can provide a number of resources and trainings around evidence-based practices and serving students with disabilities.
Thank you so much, Annette. I really appreciate it. And DCPS Central Office staff and PCSB support have been very open to and productive in our collaboration to align our supports the past couple of years. And so we're going to continue to do so moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Melody Maitland. She's going to talk about the second key principle, which is transparent communication with students and families. So I'm going to turn it over to Melody to begin speaking now.
Hi, everyone. My name's Melody Maitland, and as Jen stated, I'm the Director of Student Support Services at DCI. Just as a little background, DCI serves grades 6 through 12 and is an IB for all partial language immersion one-to-one technology school. As such, during this distance learning context, we've utilized an e-learning model primarily with live synchronous instruction according to a traditional bell schedule or period schedule. In addition to our strong technology infrastructure, I would say parent collaboration has been one of the major levers to ensure the success of our model. In order to build strong partnerships, LEAs must clearly communicate barriers to service delivery and work with families to identify solutions. And this requires ongoing reciprocal communication using tools like these that have been shown as a guide. And the more transparent, collaborative, and proactive you are with students and families during this time, the better off all stakeholders are now and in the long term. Because we know the ripple effects of this global pandemic will impact the education of all students for years to come. What you do now and into the new school year in collaboration with families can mitigate learning loss in the future. And we're going to go to the next slide, Annette. We're actually on slide 19 now. Perfect. So we always need to partner with parents, but now their input is not just valuable, but it's absolutely essential. Now that they are the homeroom teachers, there are co-teachers, we rely on them for data as well as student availability to receive the services. But how do we do that? So OSSE recommends students, families, and schools collaboratively determine alternative means of providing supports and utilize the federal flexibility by documenting these decisions via the IEP amendment process. At DCI, though, we've exercised our discretion and flexibility by documenting agreements and other individualized distance learning needs via prior written notices and SEDS, with supporting documentation, much like the tools that were shown previously. And we're staying on this slide, Annette. We got a little ahead of ourselves there. All right. So how do we ensure collaboration and increased parent engagement? Well, there are multiple ways, but there are a few key things that you have to do. First, LEAs must ensure parents know who to contact and how to contact those individuals. At DCI, our special education leadership team reached out to families in multiple formats and multiple languages to give information about distance learning services, contacts, etc. Paramount to this process, though, was the individual follow-up from case managers, ensuring families received the information, could collaborate on their student-specific needs during this time, and have a direct point of contact to help the family navigate this chaotic time. Honestly, and I hope that some of my special educators from DCI are on this call, but case managers have been the lifeline for our families, and regular communication is an expectation on both sides of the collaboration at this point. And this has allowed each IEP team to truly work as a team and be proactive about issues rather than waiting and addressing issues reactively. Second, there are many things going on in the homes of our students, especially during these challenging times. So leveraging the parent as a partner and identifying mutually agreed upon appointment times is critical, especially for younger students who need assistance remembering to join a session. All of our specialized instructional services at DCI are built into our master schedule, and they are in the form of classes. But our related services are not, and parent collaboration was key to establishing times and prompting students to attend in this new format until it became a habit, or in some cases it didn't. Third, part of scheduling appointment times is being mindful of parent schedules. Options in general are always beneficial, but during a time of crisis, it's absolutely critical to provide a good faith effort with service delivery. Not only are missed services not good for students and will likely require recovery, but scheduling unilaterally without meaningful parent input is not doing one's due diligence. Sometimes parent communication is a struggle, and that's a real reality that our team at DCI has faced in certain instances. But we do a couple of things. First, we log all the communication attempts and SEDS, and we, more importantly, try every possible way of getting in touch with kids and families. Our charge to be creative during this time extends beyond service delivery. We must be creative in the ways we engage families, utilizing multiple forms of communication and multiple modalities beyond calls and emails. We've utilized a distance learning website, text messages using school-approved phones or Google Drive numbers, parent community meetings, coffee with principals in multiple languages, speaking with families during tech troubleshooting and pickup, chatting with families during food distribution times, social media posting, weekly newsletters, etc. Utilizing a variety of options of communication with families has ensured we have a high quantity, but more importantly, a high quality of parent communication and collaboration. Next slide, Annette. So OSSE has provided guidance on what must be documented and how, but LEAs have discretion to develop protocols and procedures that will allow them to partner most effectively with families. At DCI, we just prefer to document everything. As all good educators know, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. Reactive or late documentation is laborious and it's less accurate. Stay up to date with your documentation now to support your students and families later. As I mentioned previously, our LEA uses prior written notices with supporting documentation, the amendment process, service tracker logs, and the communications log in SEDS primarily to document mutually agreed upon decisions and service refusals. Most of our agreements have been centered on evaluation completion, as we all know face-to-face testing is not doable at this time. So we've had to discuss new timelines as well as collaborate on times to complete parts of the evaluation that do not require face-to-face testing, such as rating scales, interviews, etc. Next slide, please. So as you work to ensure transparency and collaboration with families, you'll need to find new ways to identify and address each family's need for support. Next slide. And to that end, we've developed 2 sets of tools to help you address this challenge or improve whatever you've already been doing. I'll now turn it over to Kelly so she can walk you through these tools and how they work with the sample student data tool we discussed a few minutes ago, or moments ago at this point. Annette, it's Kelly's turn at the wheel.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all for your patience with me as I learn how to webinar. Okay. Just as a reminder, we won't get to every question today, but definitely keep the questions coming in the chat and we'll follow up after this session. And in that follow-up, I'll be sure to include information about how to set this up so that the input surveys really do feed into your dashboard. Now that we've discussed the student dashboard and summary dashboard, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can get data into the tool using input surveys. OSSE will provide the surveys both in Google Forms and in a document. You're welcome to use the Google form to take notes while you're on the phone with a parent or student, or take notes in the document and later enter the Google form, or to work with your team to set up a system all your own. We created these tools to be helpful. If they're not helpful, don't use them. That's totally fine, but do think about how you'll get and document this sort of thing. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to share with you here is the student input form, which is currently in the format of a Google survey, a Google form, but which we will also look to convert to Microsoft 360, and your LEA is welcome to use in any way that is in line with your own privacy policies. The first things first, the first thing that you have to do correctly is enter the student's first and last name. And you want to be sure to enter it the same way every time, because that is essentially the key that will connect this input form to the student's dashboard to make sure that you're getting one view with all of the information that you need, or at least most of it. I know it's not all of it. The student input form first asks for data about the student, name, contact information, homeroom teacher, this sort of thing. This is all just student information. Then it guides you through a series of questions to check in with the student. So first it asks about how the student is feeling, happy, safe, optimistic, bored, overwhelmed, worried. And your LEA is also on top of like customizing the dashboard. You can customize this form. So if there are other things you want to check in, you are more than welcome to add it to this form. The second section asks about how remote learning is going for you. It asks about how the students feel, whether they agree or disagree with some statements about remote learning. Section 3 continues to ask about how they are engaging in remote learning, both what sort of activities they've engaged in and what sort of activities they felt have been most helpful. If you'll remember, this feeds directly into the student form, so to the student dashboard, so that when you go in and see how the student is doing, you're able to see, oh, they've engaged in all these things, but what's really clicking for them are one-on-one instruction or receiving feedback on their work or whatever it may be. The next section asks for additional needs for information or support. So this is a range of needs, both from physical health and safety, all the way to time management or how to self-advocate. So as you'll remember, this this is the work that will, this is the part that will feed into both the student dashboard on the needs they've identified, as well as that summary dashboard on those most immediate urgent needs. And then the next section asks about is a general space to put comment, questions, or concerns before the last section, which is whether or not the student would like to see for a virtual or phone meeting follow-up. So a few notes on this. Although we encourage you to revisit these questions at a time of quickly shifting winds, you likely won't be asking all of these questions to students every time you reach out. In order to record all communications in the same place, you can still use the form for less formal communications or conversations that cover different material. Just be sure to enter the student's first and last name correctly, and then you can just click next until you get to this section, which is free text. And from there, you can enter any sort of summary or notes from your conversation. And if you do that, it will mean you have a true communications log in the student's dashboard where all of the communications are popping up in the same place. So don't feel like you have to ask every question every time you talk to the student. Any of these questions can be skipped. And if you and your team decide to keep this as a true communications log, we just encourage you to skip over the questions you don't ask and write a summary in this section 5, which is free text. You can put anything in there that will be useful to you in the future. One more thing to point out is that in addition to the summary dashboard, each of these forms has quite a bit of information in their responses. So you depend for the folks that copy over the forms and share them with their collaborators, Google has a responses summary, so you could check in and say, wow, 50% of my students are feeling overwhelmed, or whatever it may be, and use that to guide your decision making on the aggregate. And that may be useful as you think about targeted interventions versus the support that most students need at this time. The family input survey and educator input survey asks similarly important questions about how students and families are doing and what supports they need to be successful. The educator input survey also asks for information on engagement, accommodations, modifications, and areas of academic strength and need. And the family input survey also asks about scheduling information, like Melanie referred to, making sure that we are that we know what works best for families, and it asks for feedback on special education services, how they feel about things, how they feel things are going so far. So I won't lead you through that line by line, but I do encourage you to look through the PDFs of the forms or the Google Forms themselves. And again, if this tool isn't helpful to you, please don't use it. But it may be worth thinking about how you can get that information in other ways from your families and students as we sort of check in and try to get going again in the coming school year. The final thing that I want to share with you is the Student and Family Needs Identified tab in the Google Sheet. And this aggregates all of the needs identified by students, educators, and families. You may want to use this if your operations person asks about which families need help accessing technology. You could filter for all the records of that need and send them to the list of students with that need. Or you may have planned a workshop on time management and you want to invite students with that need identified. So again, you could filter by any of these needs related to physical and emotional health, remote learning, self-management, or communication, and use that to sort of figure out who needs what and aim your services in the right direction. The other thing you can do is if your using this all of next year. And by the time you get to April, it doesn't really matter what people said in September, or it's not relevant anymore. You can filter by date. So you could say in the last 30 days, who has said that they need help engaging in remote learning, or who has said that they need help supporting students while working from home or caring for others in the home. So the idea here is that as we check in with needs from educators, families, and students, to aggregate them all in one place and provide you sort of one-stop shopping as you're deciding what sort of interventions need to be widely available. Okay. Let's see. So again, I encourage you to look through them. Feel free to send us any questions about them, and we will try our best to answer them. And so here's a quick sneak peek at how the input form looks as a document rather than a Google form. It has the same questions and aims to collect the same information, but it's definitely more printer friendly. Documents could be mailed, emailed, or used to take notes during a phone conversation and then entered into the Google form. As managing a conversation and trying to write into a Google form just is difficult. The takeaway here is really to think about how to get, store, and use this information so that families, educators, and students really are all partners in this process. The information doesn't do anyone any good unless it's being used to serve students. And I know you are all way too busy to collect information simply for the sake of collecting information. So we encourage you and your team to think as far ahead of time as possible about how you will solicit this information and keep it readily available to serve students. Melody is going to share some information and insight with you on how she gets this to work at DCI. You'll be hearing more from me in the follow-up about how to get all of these tools to work should you and your team choose to use them. It's simple, I promise, but now over to you, Melody.
Thanks, Kelly. So you've done the work of getting in touch with families and students to schedule services. You've sought various stakeholder feedback using different input surveys. And so now what do you do with that data? Well, first you use it to refine your distance learning model. The state of the world right now is constantly in flux, and your distance learning model should be viewed as a living, breathing model that requires various inputs to sustain through the end of the school year, and possibly with all capital letters, of course, into the fall, although we know we don't want that. That might be a reality that we face. That input, that food, that energy, it's your data. You use your data to edit and revise your model both at the school level and an individual student level. So at DCI, we've used stakeholder input to determine our end of year calendar and our beginning of year calendar. Modify our period schedule, reduce the actual amount of direct instructional time, modify our tech supports, determine community supports to decrease isolation among our community in the forms of free wellness events, community meetings, virtual lunch clubs, virtual extracurricular activities. At a school-wide level, based on this input, at an individual level, we've ensured students have the tools and their environments to learn, such as noise buffering headphones, OT tools, hotspots for internet, etc. We've also had to increase overall IEP supports in some instances by adding a dedicated aide to virtually attend all classes with an assigned student or support in breakout rooms during live instruction with the independent task at hand, or to review screen monitoring software to ensure students are kept on task. Second, use this data to plan for your summer programming, your ESY or extended school year, summer school planning, summer credit recovery, and summer enrichment or maintenance work for students. Use the data to adapt and individualize these plans for students to ensure the maximum benefit possible. Summer regression is something we're all aware of, but summer regression plus COVID learning loss is another reality that we need to use our data sources now to begin combating. Third, use this data to begin thinking about recovery at all tiers. Tier 1, what do all kids need upon return to school? Tier 2, what do certain groups of kids need based on skill gaps developed over the distance learning timeframe? And Tier 3, what will certain students need in addition to the other tiers to recover learning? Fourth, and in my opinion most important, Use the data and lessons learned to support your fellow colleagues at other schools, both in terms of ensuring student records are complete and understandable in the case that a student transitions, but also in terms of collaboration. None of us have all of the answers, but collectively we can tackle all of the problems that have been thrown our way. Lastly, our experience during this time can be a time of reflection and forced learning. We've had to learn to adapt to this new context, and we have students who are thriving with this new form of schooling. Use the data to find those high quality, successful practices that can be integrated post-COVID. This difficult time should not go to waste. I'll turn it over to Jen. Next slide, please.
All right, Jen, tell me what slide you're on. Uh-oh, did we lose Jen? Jen? Jen, you're on mute. Oh, and she is frozen. Oof, she's got by the webinar ninja took her down. Okay, Jen's computer is frozen. Just give us a second for her to refresh her screen. In the meantime, we'll be looking in the question box to see what we've got. And Jen, also, I'll text you a call-in number that you can dial up in case you want to talk through the phone.
Guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Woo! Okay, I apologize for that. My screen was frozen. I had to. So, we're going to talk about the challenge of identifying solutions to address gaps in access or readiness that parents might be experiencing as we prepare to partner with them for service delivery.
Jen,
So
which
in order
slide do
to
you
be
want?
able, the one we were just on. Thank
This
you.
one,
It's
right?
okay.
Great.
Appreciate it. Thanks for holding down the fort while I was frozen. In order to mitigate regression, to promote recovery, and to support student progress, all of those things, you're going to have to work proactively to address gaps that parents may have, either in access to technology or readiness to partner with schools to provide instruction or services at home. Now we're ready for the next slide. Thank you, Annette. Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about tiers, and Melody kind of opened that door for us, and we're going to continue that discussion now. We're going to have to think about ways to provide tiered support and work to support our families, staff, anyone, especially our students. But for families, it's just like with kids. You want to invest heavily with your universal support and your universal support. So to be proactive and preventative, to screen and monitor progress regularly using these tools or tools that you have already or will generate, to support early intervention if we're having problems with engagement and partnerships, and to assess needs as our learning scenarios keep shifting. So for tier 2, just like with kids, you're going to gather data on all these forms. You're going to identify areas of common challenge and then come up with some strategies to address those areas for different groups who may be experiencing similar struggles. And then just like tier 3 with students, we don't give up on those who don't respond to universal and targeted supports, and we cannot afford to disengage families who need that extra support either. It's critical to develop or sustain positive collaborative relationships with all families. In your toolkit, there is a tiered support snapshot that we're going to look at later that has more details about that. Next slide, please. So one solution that we have is not unlike the conversations we were having about MTSS or RTI. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're recycling another evidence-based practice to address new challenges. This time, think about reconsidering the universal design for learning in the family engagement context. So if you look at the slide, you will see the same sorts of ideas that you'll see when you're thinking about children. How are people receiving information? How are they communicating their knowledge back? And how are they staying engaged? So we need to, just like we do with students when we're developing lessons, you have to try to anticipate what barriers people might be experiencing, and it might be preventing students or families from getting access to essential information, from being aware of opportunities that might benefit their student. How can we make sure that people are heard and that they know they have been heard and understood, especially by the IEP team? And how can we get people to attend these remote IEP meetings, to access school resources or attending virtual events or staying engaged over time as stressors continue to compound, as kids are home longer, parents are home longer, and all the economic challenges that go with all of that. You may have been asking yourself the guiding questions on the slide for a very long time, but in the midst of a simultaneous public health and economic emergency, we have many new universes of barriers to consider when we think about partnering with families. And these barriers are going to need to be reevaluated as we shift to blended learning, or we shift to brick and mortar, and we maybe have to shift back again. We hope not, but it could happen. So these tools are things that we can use as circumstances change and adapt as circumstances change. Next slide, please, Annette. So we have on page 59 in the PDF, you will find just like one possible tool that you could use as you prepare for start of school to think about how you're going to change your universal or tier 1 family engagement strategies, how they're going to need to be adapted with social distancing in mind, and how you can build relationships and a sense of community with limited face-to-face access to families and students. So I don't want to draw attention to anyone, so I'm not going to name names, but I saw earlier on the call that one of my favorite principals was here, and I love all of my favorite principals, but this principal really sticks out to me when I think about a school community. So as soon as the buildings closed, my mind went immediately to an elementary school that I provided support in before, and it was a school community had been established in the truest sense of the word. And I thought about, as I sat in the office and waited to meet with teachers and leaders in this building, I thought about all the personal interactions I witnessed with family members, and how families were woven so deeply into the day-to-day operations of the school. And I know this is true in other schools as well. And I was staggered to think about the loss the families must be feeling now that the doors of the school are closed. And honestly, more than anything else, more than federal state guidance or anything, related to compliance, just the fact that folks need that connection and have benefited from it so much in so many different school and LEA communities drives me to continue to emphasize partnership with families in this conversation today. Next slide, please. Another solution for you is to take the beautiful data tool that you create out of what you already have or the resources that we've shared with you today, and then use it to think about tiered supports. I want to give a shout out to Angela Awanake, who I present trainings with pretty regularly, or did, and she put this tool together for all of you, and so thank you to Angela. But once you've situated yourself in this tiered supports framework, then you can take the sample student data tool to identify areas where supports are needed and to develop targeted strategies to address identified areas of need. So this is just a reminder of what tiered supports look like, and a little just refresher on how you can take data and use it to ensure that all students are receiving the supports that data indicates are needed. All right, I believe we've made it to the questions. Yes, Annette?
You got it.
Let's see what's bubbled up.
So I'll let some other of our organizers today speak up if they see any common questions being asked in the question box. I do see some questions asking for more details about some of the things that have been mentioned today, and I just want to remind everyone that today is an overview of the 3 core principles and the new toolkit. However, the summer TA sessions will be a deep dive where we will get much more in-depth in sharing examples and strategies within those 3 core principles.
Thank you. Is there anything else? I'm not seeing anything else we have to touch on exactly right now, but we'll have one more opportunity.
And I do see some questions coming in about opportunities to translate these forms.
Thank you.
Flag for people that if you're thinking about your group of students who are dually identified as being both students with disabilities and students who are English learners, there are additional resources and upcoming webinar trainings that OSSE will be offering around that particular population. I will put the link to subscribe to our Teaching and Learning Professional Development Bulletin. I'll put that link to subscribe to that newsletter in the chat box, and next week's newsletter that comes out only once a month, it's coming out next week, will have some opportunities advertised there for summer PD.
Thank you very much, Annette. I appreciate it. And just for those of you who serve, most of you do, but for those of you who serve students who are duly identified, English learners and students with disabilities, I want you to know that Jennifer Norton, who is one of our colleagues at OSSE, has been working very hard to ensure that the families of students who are English learners are being well served during this time. And as we have worked pretty feverishly to try to generate resources for folks, we have been in contact with one another and have plans to continue to work together to ensure that resources that are family facing are available in multiple languages. All right, so that's down the road. So speaking of data, we got it to the final key principle, which is developing data-driven supports. So let's do that now. Thanks. All right, this is why we're actually here, right? To use data to think about how we can address students' needs for support in new circumstances, to figure out how to identify what students need now and how we can best give it to them. Next slide, please. So, as always, to meet your obligations under the IDEA, LEAs have to offer each student receiving special education services an IEP reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in the light of the child's circumstances. Some of you have heard me quote Andrew 5,000 times. I'm not sorry for that. And as I will remind you, this calculation has to be driven by student-specific data. Next slide, please. So that's how, you use these sample tools. In circumstances that cause unanticipated interruptions to instruction or shifts to remote or blended models of instruction or service delivery, IEP teams have to use data to review the impact of the lapse in services for each student with a disability and to consider receipt of educational benefit. So you have tools now. These tools are tools that you are already using, that you can use to make sure that your IEP team decisions are data-driven and describe the current circumstances of each student with a disability, that you have considered the impact of the lapse in services for each student with a disability, and if there has been a lapse, and that you consider the receipt of educational benefit for each student. Okay. Next slide, please, Annette. Thank you. So one of those challenges is going to be collaborating with families to ensure students are available for instruction, service, and ongoing assessment. Can move on. So one of the solutions is to use the forms that we've already showed you to gather information that you can use when you schedule student services. And so you can align provider availability with family preference to the best of your ability. You can't always give everybody what they want all of the time, but it is nice to try to meet people where they are whenever you can, and to acknowledge that you made an effort. I think goes a long way to develop those strong and positive relationships. Kelly did show you the snapshot here from the parent input form. She showed it to you earlier, so I won't zip through it again now. But I do encourage you to take a deep dive into the family input form in particular, and to use it, or your own version of it, not just once to get family input, but on an ongoing basis, particularly as our public health, economic, and learning circumstances continue to evolve. Those of you who have attended that are familiar with the Andrew F decision, or have attended the IEP quality series, know that in that decision, there's a large emphasis on parent voice and meaningful family input. And so I encourage you to use some of the mechanisms that we've provided as examples of how you can ensure that parents feel heard and feel like true partners. Annette, would you go to the next slide, please? So another solution is to gather input from teachers and other providers regarding service provision. There was a question in the question box a while back about what do we do if parents don't fill out forms or students don't fill out input forms. And I responded to that person individually that we've tried to build in some redundancies into the forms so that we're trying to gather data that can be triangulated across perspectives, but also so that you can get some information from somebody somewhere, okay? So in addition to all the input forms, Kelly has generated another form. It's on page 61 in your PDF of forms, and it's linked in the toolkit. It's a sample weekly service tracker, and it provides an alternate means of gathering input from service providers. There's already a teacher input form, but this one is sort of a high-level overview that allows you to record weekly service data regarding up to 10 students at a time in a single form, so that you don't have to do an individual form for every student on your caseload, but you can do up to 10 at a time in one shot with the form. But it'll still, if you enter their names correctly, it will still feed the information to their individual student pages. So I encourage you to check that out. By the way, these things are not just good for remote learning times. Just putting that out there. All right, Annette, we're ready for the next slide. Thank you. So, challenge that is also a solution. Preparing now to consider individual student receipt of educational benefit now and later. I know that we are all concerned about students' health, emotional well-being, and access to educational opportunity first and foremost. That's before we start worrying about compliance and the potential burden of recovery services. But LEAs do have to take very seriously the need to document IEPT decisions and service provision attempts and responses, and to consider individual student receipt of benefit from those services. Without this documentation, without this consideration, you're going to be poorly positioned to mitigate negative impacts to students' well-being or learning, or to make informed or defensible decisions about recovery services that students may or may not need. Next slide, please. So the primary purpose of this tool is to assist you in assisting students and families, right? To use student-specific data to develop, implement, and review the efficacy of the evidence-based individualized supports for students with disabilities that you're providing. Also, truly, to do all the same things for your family engagement. The data that informs student service will also be useful as you consider the receipt of educational benefit on a student-by-student basis. So, diminished educational benefit could result from extended school closures, from services that could not be provided remotely, of a delay in provision of services, or the student's unavailability to receive services. And all of these things can be documented with what's been provided to you today. Next slide, please, Annette. So please use the toolkit. It's a great starting point for enhancing your procedures and protocols for informing these considerations. You don't have to use these specific tools, but they are a great way for you to review whether or not you are as efficiently, effectively as possible collecting all the data that you need to inform all of the decisions that you're going to have to make with more limited contact with students and families than we are all accustomed to. So there are different considerations that I just shared with you about the receipt of educational benefit. In the table, you will find data sources from the toolkit that you might use to keep data that will help you to consider the questions on the left-hand side of the table. So for example, has the provision of services been delayed? You could use any or all of the input survey forms and actually the service provision tracker for that. You could use the service adaptation worksheet, the educator input, and the weekly service tracker to figure out if the student's been available to receive services. But there are ways to gather this information in almost every tool that Kelly has shared with you today. Next slide, please. All right, let us go back to the questions box. So there is a question that I think we should share the response to. Some teachers are asking about progress reports. Does OSSE have any guidance on particular language to include, especially if not introduced or no progress as a result of a closure? So OSSE has not issued any guidance or language to be included in progress reporting, but you are encouraged to continue to complete progress reporting as it is essential informal data collection tool that is intended to inform evaluation, IEP revision, and recovery planning work. You can set policies internally on how or if you wish to standardize how people describe the student's present level of progress or their present level of progress. If a service wasn't introduced or why it wasn't introduced, that's up to you. That's part of your LEA discretion to determine how to describe that. But it's not up to you to have the flexibility not to collect and report progress data.
And just a reminder on that, for those of you that serve at the school level, please get in touch with your central office level special education leadership to find out if there are particular policies or protocols for progress reporting specific to your LEA.
Continue to look. Thank you, Victoria, for pointing out that LEAs can work with the district's language access line to complete input forms via phone with a translator.
I will look for the link to more information about the language access service and put that link in the box.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much, Annette. All right, are we ready to move forward? Awesome, so let's review. We can click on over to the next thing. So in the LEA toolkit, the very final page has a table that sort of summarizes the key principle, the primary takeaway, or like the big ideas from the key principles, and the associated resources or sample tools that we have provided that you can use to ensure that you are aligning your protocols and procedures, the tools you're using and the way you use them with these key principles. And so I hope you'll take the time to look at the table. It's also a great place to find all the links in one spot. If that would that make it easier for you? You could try that. So you just use the table by looking for the key principle or looking for the resource you're looking for, and you can say, you know what, we're using an accommodations adaptation matrix. That's great. We're showing that we've been flexible, that we've offered families options. Oh, you know, we did the service adaptation worksheet with the families. We definitely have partnered with them. We've used our discretion, but we've also been flexible with families, so on and so forth. Next slide, please. The same thing is true for the other two key principles. Annette, could you go back to slide 44 for me for just a second? I missed something that I wanted to say. Thank you very much. You want to make sure that you have the data you need to serve students, and you want to remain consistent with IDEA requirements. We hope that these tools will help you create systems to do that. Next slide, please. Sorry, guys. As you create these systems, you need to remember all along the way that parents are your partners now more than ever before. To support students' health, safety, and access to opportunity, we have to make our relationships with families work in the service of the kids that we share. Next slide, please. Don't get angry with me, people who are monitoring the question box, but I just want everybody who thinks that these tools are pretty awesome and would love to shout out Kelly for making them. I'm sure when I asked her to join me in this endeavor, she didn't realize she would be sleeping for 2 weeks. But if you want to shout her out in the questions, because she deserves a big round of applause, and you guys can't really do that right now. I want to take a moment to thank her. She took a kind of poorly described vision for what this toolkit could be, and she made it into something that was more useful and more connected to the values that drive our work than I could have ever imagined. So thank you to Kelly, truly. And I truly hope that you will use these tools. Those of you who do are encouraged to reach out to me for support, but more importantly, I want you to share your enhancements, your applications, the lessons you learned with us and with your colleagues across the city. I would be so delighted to provide a remote platform for you to share with one another your learnings from using any of these tools or any new versions that you have created. And so let's keep this conversation going, because this situation is going to continue to change, and we're going to need to continue adapting together. This is not a one and done or a box check for us at all. We really want to get this conversation going and keep it going. And to that end, Annette, next slide.
All right, we've reached the end of the content for today, and it's not quite 3 o'clock. We have a couple more minutes. So today's webinar, that was a lot thrown at you in a short amount of time. These are very deep principles, and we strongly encourage you and your colleagues to sign up for the deeper dive sessions that will be held throughout the summer. As you can see here on the screen, we've taken all 3 core principles and broken them out into their own separate deep dive sessions. Each session is scheduled to happen twice over the summer so that you can fit it in between all of your beach trips and, of course, with social distancing and all your other fun summer plans. So take note of these dates. And this is in the slides we sent you, but I do want to note that moving forward, registration for any kind of professional development training with OSSE, the platform to register is going to be a little bit different than the typical Eventbrite that you may have seen in days past or the GoToWebinar. We may still end up using GoToWebinar. We're still exploring virtual platforms here at OSSE to make sure we have the best and most engaging participant sessions throughout the summer. But in the meantime, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you the registration. If you look at the bottom of the slide, there is a link. Let me put this link in the chat box as well. Link in chat box. Oh, where's my chat box? This is the homepage of the OSSE registration training system. I'm going to switch my screen over to show you my view here. All right. You should be able to see a purple bar at the top that says Octo. This is a quick-based application that OSSE built several years ago to help people sign up for data system trainings. So, for example, LEA data managers, maybe some of you that are special education managers, special education points of contact, you may have seen use this portal before to register for trainings like on SLED or SEDS, things like that. But for many of you, this is a new platform. Just want to show you a couple things. And our division, the Division of Teaching and Learning, is in the process of transitioning all our training registrations over to this platform, and it has been expanded. So it's not perfected yet. We're still working out the kinks, but this is where you will find registration for all of our other summer PD sessions as well, which will be announced in our June 4th professional development newsletter that I put the subscriber link to in the chat box. So when you get to this page, it may look a little funny. If you scroll down, there are currently no in-person training sessions for obvious reasons. But if you look at the online training sessions, what's a little bit weird about this is it only shows what's coming up in the next 30 days, which you can see right here is part 1, oh, do I have the wrong date in here? May 29th. Uh-oh. See, I'm still learning how to use this system. Wait a minute. There we go. Okay. June 17th. Serving students with disabilities during remote or blended learning, part 1. This is the June 17th date that I showed you on the slide that you just saw. If you want to register for this training, you do not click on this part. If you click on this part, it simply takes you to a screen with more detailed information about this session. So I'm going to go back. The mistake people make when they're new to this platform is that they don't scroll over to the right. You have to scroll, first of all, you scroll down to find it by date. Then you scroll over to the right where you should see a button that says Add Registration. that is how this platform works. You find the training session on the date that you want, and you scroll over, click this gray button for add registration. Now,
thank you so much, Annette.
yeah, so that's just a little hint. There'll be other kinks we're working out about this training platform, but you will be using this for more and more training registrations, even if the trainings are held virtually.
Can you step back to the last slide just so I can share my contact information?
Yep.
Please.
Switch over. Thanks everyone who's hung out with us for 2 hours today. We know it has not been easy to stare at your screen for 2 hours.
I cannot believe there are still 329 people hanging in there. This is very impressive.
Props to you. Okay, so here again is the screen with the dates for the upcoming sessions that Jen and Kelly will be hosting. And here is the contact information for our wonderful presenter today, Jen.
Thank you very much, Annette. So if you have follow-up questions, please funnel them through me. I think I have asked so much of my co-presenters already. So thank you very much for your time. I want you to know how sorry I am that I didn't get to see your faces and hang out with you like I usually do and hear your thoughts in real time. And I'm really looking forward to the day where we can all learn together again. Take care, stay safe, and see you at our next session. Thank you so much, supporters and co-presenters. Thank you.